The Great Debate Series. 25 greatest athletes since 2000.
I love it. I love how this turns into like Club 2000. Here we go. Okay, without further ado, we continue to count down. Andrew Perloff, who is number 20? Oh, wait, should we recap 25 through 21?
Do you have it in front of you?
I absolutely do. So let's recap 25 through 21 so we don't leave you hanging there. 25 was Shaun White. 24, Alexander Ovechkin. 23, Shohei Ohtani. 22, Floyd Mayweather. 21, Clayton Kershaw.
Okay.
And here we go with our next 5.
Number 20. Should we play the music and get... No, okay. We're good. Okay, number 20, we're going to go with Diana Taurasi.
How about Diana Taurasi, the WNBA 3-time champion, 07, 09, 2014. So really sprinkled throughout the 2000s. A 5-time Olympic gold medalist, 04, 08, 2012, 2016, 2020. She's an MVP. She's a 2-time finals MVP. And also won 3 consecutive NCAA championships. Now, Diana Taurasi gets in over Maya Moore simply because Taurasi has been playing since 2004. I mean, she is the 2000s when Maya Moore has retired.
Yeah, I saw her.
And Maya Moore was the 2011 draft, I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's scoring 15 points a game this year at 41. Diana Taurasi. Amazing. She's out with a chest injury. Her backup is awesome, by the way. I saw a highlight yesterday. But I just think also, there's a bit of a, as you mentioned, there were other women players that Brittany Griner certainly deserved a lot of consideration. But I mean, I feel pretty good about this spot because Diana Taurasi, too, with the UConn thing, to me, is really the face of the sport this century.
Absolutely. Number 19, Perloff, go ahead.
Number 19. Oh, you know him, you love him, Rafael Nadal.
Yes, Rafael Nadal makes the list. This is, spoiler, first tennis player to make the list. Won't be the only tennis player to make the list. Most consecutive weeks with a top 10 ranking. Think about this for Nadal. He never left the top 10 from April of 2005 to March of 2023. It was like 2 months ago. 22 Grand Slam titles, 14 at the French Open, won the Grand Slam, of course. He won a Golden Slam also, which is all 4 majors and an Olympic gold in the same year. Only one of 2 men to do that. 81 consecutive wins on clay, youngest career Grand Slam, and the first men's player to win on 3 different surfaces in the same year. Rafael Nadal is 19 on our list.
Okay, number 18. Future Super Bowl winner with the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Rodgers, 2005, still active in 2023. 4-time MVP, of course, the one Super Bowl MVP, 4-time All-Pro, 10-time Pro Bowlers, 10 Pro Bowls, 10 years with over 4,000 yards. 6 times he's had the best touchdown to interception ratio. In the regular season, he has the best touchdown to interception ratio in the history of the league. 6 times had the lowest passing interception percentage. 3 times he's had most total TDs. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Highest passer rating, best TD to interception ratio, and lowest INTs in NFL history throughout the 2010s. I mean,
Don't forget, he owns an actual team. He owns the Bears.
And according to Wikipedia, he owns the Bears. Aaron Rodgers is 18 on this list.
Number 17, our second NHL player, Sidney Crosby.
Sidney Crosby comes in at 17 on the list. Of course, the 3-time Stanley Cup champ, 2-time Hart Trophy, which means MVP, the 2-time Conn Smythe, which means playoff MVP. He's got the 2 Richard trophies as the leading goal scorer, 2-time Ross Trophy, leader in points, 2-time Pearson or Lindsay, which is the MVP, is voted on by the players. Now, how about this? Only 4 points separate Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin the last time I checked. However, Crosby has done this in 150 fewer games than Ovechkin because of injury. He also has 2 Olympic golds, whereas Ovechkin has 0, and way more playoff wins. Way more playoff success. So there you go.
Number 16, Let's go NBA. Tim Duncan.
And Tim Duncan comes in at 16 with a big fundamental, 19 years. Now, did win in the 90s. Did have a title in 1999, but also 03, 05, 07, and 2014. Very well represented in the 2000s as a 5-time NBA champ, the 3-time Finals MVP, 2-time League MVP, 10-time All-NBA first team, and 8-time All-NBA defensive first team. You could say, well, who do they beat in the finals? The Knicks, the Nets, Detroit, Cleveland, but then took on the LeBron James Heatles and beat them as one of the farewells. So there you go.
Okay. Can I tell you a couple points of controversy that I think are going to jump out?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you could make an argument against Nadal because...
To not be on the list?
Well, he does belong, but here's the thing. If it wasn't for the French Open, he dominated clay. So you could argue he's a specialist. And the other thing, too, is if he was a lefty, which gave Federer problems.
Yes, it did.
I think his lack of versatility could be used against him. Now, what I think could be used for him is on clay, and you know a little more about tennis than me, just the endurance to be able to play on clay like that is incredible. His physical shape is ridiculous. Even when he won recently, I think he won an Australian recently. He came back from injury. His physical fitness is spectacular. Do you think there's any argument against him because he did all of it at the French Open?
Well, I think that's why he's the lowest tennis player on our list. I would agree with that. I mean, it is very clearly lopsided, but it's not like he never won other titles. 2 Australian Open titles, the 2 Wimbledon titles, and the 4 U.S. Open titles. Yeah. So, if he had won Wimbledon and 1 U.S. Open or something like that, I'd say, wow, he's just all about clay. But he's shown that he can do it on other surfaces. Okay, 2 more controversies. Yeah. Tim Duncan at 16. I don't want to give anything away. That means that Tim Duncan is probably below some other NBA players. And there aren't a lot of NBA players who have more championship impact than Tim Duncan. So that one seems like we're setting up. We're not going to give away anything below this. But I wonder if we're going to look at this and say, I wonder if Tim Duncan could have jumped that guy. I wonder. I think where you and I, and one of the conversations I think you and I had about this was the 2014 title. So the 5th of Duncan's titles. That was the Kawhi MVP title. Right. So while he's still having success throughout later years of the 2000s and closer to where we are today, that had kind of ceased to be him as the focal point by the time he got to 2014. I do remember in that finals, he stepped up and oh, look at old man Duncan with some key points there. So you're right. He was definitely a different player by then. That's a great point. And one was in 99, which was a strike shortened year. But then, and then my last point of controversy. Well, hold on. Before you move on to your last point of controversy, I'm cool with Duncan being 16 on this list as long as Shaq is higher than him. If Shaq is higher than him on this list, I'm cool with it. But if Duncan is higher than Shaq in the 2000s, we've got a bone to pick. Well, why? Well, Shaq had 4 titles. Yeah. Shaq was the most dominant. No. Yeah, okay. He was the most dominant player that I've ever witnessed on the basketball court. Now, he obviously how far into the 2000s are we getting? He played it until 2010, 2011. He won 4 titles in the 2000s. But Shaq played until then, but some of those last years was really bouncing around Shaq, out of shape Shaq. Sure, but he averaged 30 points a game, in 2000, 28, 27, 27. Shaq was still dominant. He wasn't as dominant in the 2000s as he was in the 90s, but he was dominant enough that if I were to take Shaq in the 2000s with those Lakers, and even with the Heat for a couple years, versus Duncan, I would still have to take Shaq. But the last title he won was 2005. That's not that far into the 2000s. So this is tough when you have somebody who was drafted in was Shaq 92, 93? 93, yeah. So... Yeah, is he more of a 90s guy or is he more of a 2000s guy? He led the league in scoring twice in his career, and both were in the 90s. Well, the second one was 99-2000, so that kind of counts. Well, okay, but now we're talking about the 21st century. Can we count that, Mike? Let's be honest, because you got those 2 months in the fall. I don't think we can give him that one. Is that the spirit of the rule here? So that's a controversy. Okay, so you can obviously see, do we just reveal? I think what everyone can kind of glean here from how we're talking about it, Shaquille O'Neal did not make this list. There was something about... Interesting. I haven't seen ahead of 16, so I'm not sure if he was ahead of Duncan. Yeah. We talked yesterday about the Pro Reference Bolds
how a bold means that you led the league in some category.
Right.
Shaq is just littered, even in the 2000s, littered with bolds, field goal percentage, points. He led the league in scoring. He won the titles.
In the 2000s, he didn't lead in any of these. I'm looking. It's all shooting percentage.
Like I said, 99, 2000. There's 2 months in 99. The rest was in 2000.
Okay, well, shooting percentage also when you're 6 inches from the basket. I hope your shooting percentage is high.
What was Tim Duncan's game? He was 9 inches from the basket. Right. Tim Duncan shockingly has 0 bolds in his career. 0.
I know, but
1.
Tim Duncan is more in the 2000s. You realize this. Tim Duncan won a title in 99, but that was 1. The other 4 were all won in the 2000s.
They both have 4 in the 2000s. And Shaq has more bolds because Duncan has 0 in his career. I'm just saying, I can understand Duncan, but like Shaq to me was the more dominant guy even in the 2000s.
Okay.
How many MVPs did he win in the 2000s, Shaq?
I think Shaq only has one MVP in his career.
Finals MVPs in the 2000s.
Oh, Shaq won one MVP. It was 99-2000, which we don't count.
So here's the question, though. You also have Tim Duncan, who's known as the greatest power forward of all time. And I think we all agree that he's the greatest power forward of all time, yes? Okay.
No, because he was a center, but go ahead.
Okay.
I'm right there with Perloff. He was a center playing power forward.
Okay, does anyone say Shaq was the greatest center of all time? People don't say all time.
Yeah, but
there's so many great centers.
Yeah,
who's Duncan being compared to? Karl Malone was elite, great, excellent, but like the centers are Wilt and Russell and Kareem, 3 of the 5 best players in the history of the game.
Right, and I think that Shaq is probably top whatever history of the game. We can debate that. 15, 10, whatever you want to say. Maybe 15 probably.
Well, here's the thing about Duncan. What about Duncan said power forward? He was a great rim protector, and he was an amazing defensive center.
Well,
I don't buy
he was
this
playing
power.
Alongside David Robinson. That's
but
why.
for 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
then he didn't
Well, then it was
have.
like
Then he
Will
had Will
Purdue.
Purdue.
They were just put into center. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the 2000s, he did not have a lot of David Robinson. But anyway, regardless, so it is a very valid argument. Honestly, part of it for me is Shaq didn't quite meet his potential in the 2000s. Like, he kind of let it go there at the end a little bit, where Tim Duncan really, I think, maximized everything, and he played forever.
He just went later. Nick is in the chat. Nick from Texas, our friend, said, Maggie, you did say yesterday some of these athletes may have played in the late 90s. You're right. I definitely did, and Tim Duncan is one of them, who was drafted in 1997.
But here's where I think the real controversy is going to be. When we look back on this list 10 years from now, Aaron Rodgers at number 18, because we're assuming that, what if he does well this year? I mean, I hate to say it, but it's going to be recency bias. If he does something with his second team, I mean, is there a chance that he's going to move up this list the rest of his career?
Well, much like LeBron James winning a title for Cleveland, I know that's because he was like a hometown guy.
Yeah.
But if Rodgers wins a Super Bowl for the New York freaking Jets, it's like 1.5 Super Bowl.
Yeah, or even has some playoff success. Say he even gets to a conference title game. I think that's a huge addition to his resume, because Montana, remember, got to the playoffs with the Chiefs, won a playoff game. Everyone's like, ooh, Joe Montana, that helped him legacy-wise. So I don't even think he has to win it all. I think he has a chance to move up here if he plays well.
So I guess the question is, and maybe Samter, this is good for a poll question for today. Aaron Rodgers comes in at 18 on the top 25 athletes of the 21st century since the year 2000. Is he more likely to move up or down on this list? Because he could play for another 5 years? Does he move up? We can't tell you who's
Wait.
now.
5 years feels extreme.
Okay, whatever. 3 years.
Yeah.
It's football. These guys never end.
I know, but he's been threatening.
Days.
Like, what is the ratio of how many times you threaten to retire, how long you can last? I mean, that's a long. If he plays 5 years, then he's moving up.
Okay, so is the real controversy from 20 to 16 the fact that Aaron Rodgers, is he going to move up or down, is the real controversy? We put Tim Duncan on and we left out Shaq. Because Perloff, how long did you and I spend on Shaq? Half an hour?
We definitely, we had
Shaq
a problem with Shaq. Because we're both, I'm a Shaq fan.
I love Shaq.
Yeah, I think I might be a bigger Shaq fan.
I love Shaq because I think he should have won MVP every single year he was playing. They had to design entire defenses. Hack-a-Shaq became a thing just because of him. So to me, I know that existed.
Yeah.
But nobody knew how to stop him.
I think your love for Shaq might be better. I wasn't going to say he should have won MVP every year. That's pretty good.
I agree with Maggie. Every year he was the most dominant player. Now, was the thing that held Shaq down the most the precipitous fall at the end of his career where he just gained weight and wasn't trying as hard? Or was it the fact that he had almost 10 years in the 90s before the 2000s?
I think it was the fact that he did peak. Maybe you could say he peaked in the early 2000s, but it wasn't for enough of the 2000s. Like Shaq did a decade in the 90s, basically.
Well, I think he couldn't win without Kobe. And then he
he did with Dwayne Wade.
Yeah, well, I mean, he couldn't get to his first championship ring in Orlando. So he needed. Yes. So my point was like he couldn't do it on his own, and then he blew up the Lakers situation. I think we know enough now.
Well, did he blow it up or did Kobe blow it up?
I think Shaq blew it up. I think Shaq, I've heard Shaq talk about it, and I think Shaq takes a big chunk of that blame. Regardless, they blew it up. They couldn't keep it together. And then I think people credit Wade a lot for that last title, although it's unfair.
Wade's ascent in that finals and how he got to the free throw line as much as he did, and he really did put the team on his back. But Shaq was huge there. They're not winning that title without Shaq.
You know, my theory in the early 2000s was the key to whether the Lakers or whoever won the title, how do you officiate Shaq? If you let him bowl over, if the officials start calling offensive fouls on Shaq, then his team loses. If they let him just bowl over everybody, he was such a physical force. So it was complicated with Shaq. I do think he left a little on the table. I think that's my issue.
855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. So far, if you're keeping track, Mike Trout has been left off this list, and so has Shaquille O'Neal.